Alright, so reading, I think, can be one of the most difficult and frustrating things when you're learning a foreign language, because even after you've actually learnt a bunch of words and you've put so much time into learning the language, you can pick up a book, or even not a book, even like a practice reading text, and you try reading it and you understand nothing. Like, you look at it and it's like, what have I been doing with all of my time? Why am I able to look at this and I just get absolutely nothing out of it? I have no idea what's going on. And trust me, nobody knows that frustration more than me. It's so annoying when it just feels like nothing is working. So in this video, I'm going to give you 5 tips that literally change the game. If you can do 1 or 2 of these, it will completely change how reading works. If you can do all 5 of these, the amount of progress you will make in literally 1 week of doing all 5 of these would be ridiculous. You'll be so much better at reading, you'll be way more fulfilled, you'll understand how to improve, etc. So definitely stick around to the end for a bonus tip as well, and hit the subscribe button, but let's go. So the number one thing that I need you to understand, the first tip I'm going to give you, is all about purpose. You probably don't even understand why you are reading stuff in a foreign language. You're just like picking up a book and like reading it. You don't actually have the purpose in mind. Let me give you a reality check. You don't deserve to be good at reading yet. You literally, how many, say you're learning Italian, or it doesn't matter, but I'm just going to use Italian as an example. How much Italian reading have you actually done in your life? How many hours have you put in compared to English? You probably spent hundreds of thousands, but maybe not quite that much, thousands, tens of thousands of hours reading in English, and most people aren't even that good at reading in English. I see people, so many people struggle with reading these days because they're on their phones constantly. But how good do you actually deserve to be in the foreign language? Because you've put in a few hours a week for a few months, you think you deserve to be good at reading, and you're not even doing the right things anyway because you haven't watched this video yet. Of course you don't deserve to be able to read even easy texts properly. And by easy, you're probably trying to read a practice text that has 200 different words in it, and it's actually quite difficult. So I want you to understand you don't deserve to be good at reading yet, so don't be frustrated that you can't do it. You haven't learnt how to actually get better at reading. You haven't done enough of it yet, and so you need to do these things before you can actually call yourself good at reading. So that's the first thing I want you to understand. The second thing I'm going to tell you is the uncut gem analogy. So I want you to imagine that when you're reading, you're actually a miner and you're mining for gems. Imagine if a miner pulled like a diamond out of the ground, right? And it was obviously, it's like encased in rock, right? It's not refined. And the miner got really, really angry and threw it back in the ground. And he's like, oh, why can't all the diamonds that come out of the ground be polished? It's like, bro, when you're reading and you don't understand what's going on and you get angry, it's kind of like you're that miner throwing the uncut gem in the ground. And it's like every single diamond, every single gem you find is obviously going to be uncut. Like, why would you expect to understand everything? Why would you expect to pull polished gems out of the ground? That's not what's going to happen. What you need to do is every time you encounter a word you don't understand or something you don't understand, it's kind of like pulling an uncut gem out of the ground, and to put it into, and to turn it into a polished gem, you need to actually learn the word, understand what's going on, and refine it. And that is how you get the polished gems. Every time you don't understand what a word is, it's literally like the miner throwing an uncut gem back into the ground. You don't actually understand how the process of reading works. You're supposed to encounter things you don't understand. Every time you encounter words you don't understand, that is an opportunity for learning. And if you watch this video to the end, you'll understand how to take advantage of that opportunity for learning. And I want you to understand the purpose of reading isn't to understand everything and to have a fun time. Like, sure, you can read stuff for fun if you want. When you get better at the foreign language, you can read things in that language that you completely understand for fun. But the purpose of reading in the foreign language is to encounter things you don't understand so that you can improve. So don't be frustrated when you encounter uncut gems. Don't be frustrated when you don't understand what's going on. That's good. You shouldn't understand what's going on. If you understood everything that was going on, it's too easy. You need to encounter things where you don't understand some of the words. So that's what I want you to understand. And finally, growth requires pain. That's a gym analogy. But just remember that when you don't understand stuff, that means you have opportunity for growth. So that is the first thing I want you to understand. And if I was to stop the video now and the only thing you were to get from this video was to understand that encountering things you don't understand is good. The purpose of reading is to encounter things you don't understand. You can only get better at stuff when you don't understand stuff. You would literally be you would be set to make more progress than you currently are on. So that's how important each of the things in this video are. The second tip I'm going to give you is plan. And I've tried to start everything with P. I don't know why I did that, but that's what I did. The second thing I want you to understand is you need to have a plan. If you don't have any plan at all, you're basically going nowhere, and I'll explain what I mean by that. A plan is basically the path towards a goal. So if you have no plan for reading, no plan to actually get better at all, you will probably still get a little bit better, but it'll be messy and you won't actually be fully locked down in it. So to get better at reading is pretty straightforward. You just need to learn more words and you need to familiarize yourself with the way those words work. So some languages, Russian particularly, that's the language I'm learning at the moment, put words in a weird order, and it's just kind of, when I say weird, they put it in a different order to English, and they do things that just don't make sense to a native English speaker. So obviously it's not just learning the words, it's actually understanding how to use them in those ways. That is how you get better at reading, but a lot of people don't even think about that. They just get frustrated that they can't understand. I want you to take time to actually learn stuff you don't understand. You need to have some kind of plan when you're reading. Are you just going to read through the entire book, or are you actually going to go back and go over the words you didn't understand, make a list and learn them? So what I'd recommend you do, one potential plan you could have is that, okay, when you're reading a book, you study it a little bit like a textbook, and maybe you read a chapter and then you go back and you do the first 2 pages, you make a list of the words you don't understand from them, then you put them into flashcards, you learn them, and then you reread the first 2 pages, and then maybe you can read the second chapter and do the same thing going forward from there. That's one example of something you can do. For me, I'm reading Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in Russian at the moment, and I'm going back and finding the words I don't know, making lists of them, learning them, and then rereading them. That's called the input repetition method, and I'll have that video linked in the description, and I'll have it pop up on the screen right now. It's an excellent video on learning words, so I'd highly recommend you check it out afterwards. But yeah, you need to have some kind of plan, some kind of... When I say plan, by the way, if you don't understand what I mean, I just mean some kind of system for learning, for getting better at reading. You need to have some kind of system for doing those 2 things, learning new words and familiarizing yourself with the idea. So whenever you encounter words you don't know, you need to learn them. That's how you get better at reading. So yeah, I'd recommend you check out that video because that will go more in depth on how to learn words and get better at reading. But that's number 2. You need to have a plan. The third thing I want you to understand is pleasure. Learning a language can be fun, but it can also be frustrating, and it's a lot easier and more productive when you are reading something you enjoy, even if you don't fully understand everything. So depending on the level you're at, you're kind of constrained by what you can read that's enjoyable. So I've written an example for each level of language learning to give you a few different options for what you can read. So if you're a complete beginner, you're very much constrained in what you can read. So if you're at that level, sorry, there isn't much there's not much diversity in what you can read. So you basically have to stick to practice paragraphs. I will link lingua.com in the description below. That has practice paragraphs for a bunch of different languages. If you have a very niche language that might not be in lingua.com, just comment below and I'll give you a hand finding resources. But when you're a complete beginner, you kind of have to stick to very, very basic sentences. When you're kind of new, so maybe you've been doing it for a few months, you can attempt short stories for beginners. And by the way, all of these things are going to be hard for the level you're at. You're not going to understand a lot of what's going on, but that is how you make progress. So you could pick up an Ollie Richards book. I think I had a picture of them at the start. These books, if you look up Ollie Richards, he's got books in a lot of different languages with short stories for learners of the language to read. You can try parallel text. If you're intermediate, you can try translations of books you're familiar with. So for example, I read the entire Harry Potter. That one's in English, but the box set is in Italian. I read the whole thing in Italian, and I'm currently reading them in Russian. I'm not as good at Russian because I'm learning it now, but I'm attempting it. You can also read Wikipedia and stuff if you want as well. And when you're more advanced, you can read books/text in the foreign language. I didn't have a picture of it here, but I read half of L'isola di Arturo, which is by Elsa Morante. It's a book in Italian. It means Arturo's Island in English. Very famous, and it was quite difficult because it's written for native speakers. And I'm pretty sure it was written in the 50s. It's an older book, so that was a bit difficult. But you can try and read texts that are for native speakers when you're more advanced. And yeah, you will find you get better, but just try and do things that you actually enjoy. If you can replicate things in the foreign language that you do in your native language, it's way easier to make progress. And a bonus tip I will give you right here is to throw some skin in the game. So what I mean by that real quick is before I even learnt Italian, I'd always liked the cover art for the Harry Potter books in Italian that I've since bought. So I thought that was kind of cool. When I learn the language, I'm going to buy those books as a special reward because I'll enjoy it, and it's kind of a good thing to have. So what I'd recommend you do, I don't recommend spending an exorbitant amount of money, and you don't have to, but to buy something to do with the language you're learning because it gives you a reason to keep going forward. Otherwise, you've wasted money, and it's kind of cool reward to have. So if you like books, you can buy a book. If you like TV shows, you get a subscription service for that language. You don't just have to use like Netflix and put the subtitles on. You could actually buy a subscription service for that language for native speakers. Just do something like that. You could do that. Number 4, progress. So I don't know who said this quote. It definitely wasn't me, but I like using it a lot. But it's easy when you're winning. What that means is when you are, imagine you're a runner, for example, and you're coming first in every race, you're a champion. It's so much easier to, maybe not the best example, but it's easy to put in work when you're winning, when you're making progress, when you see yourself flying ahead. As soon as you see yourself, whether it's anything, but in this instance, learning a foreign language, as soon as you think you're becoming sluggish, you're forgetting stuff, you don't feel that you're making strong progress, it's very easy to get bogged down and feel demotivated. You don't feel like doing any studying, and you don't feel like doing any reading. So what I want you to do is to constantly remind yourself and make sure that you are making progress. You need to be able to see the progress you're making, because that is fuel. Progress is the number one fuel. When you can see that you are actually going towards your goal, at the end of the day, you want your goal. That's why you're doing these things. You're trying to achieve the goal. So when you can see that you're going towards the goal, it's very easy to keep doing this stuff. As soon as you don't think you're going towards your goal anymore, it becomes difficult to do things that are kind of, you're not going to feel like doing flashcards every day. And so if you add on top of that the fact that you don't think you're getting anywhere, it's very easy to give up. So a few things I'd recommend you do is, one, retest yourself, reread segments of books, and you can do this in any area of language learning. You can re-listen to things, but just rereading stuff that was previously difficult and seeing if it's easier now that you know more words is, I think, a really great way of gauging your progress. You can also reread your notebook. You can reread practice paragraphs you've written out to see how you've improved and find old mistakes. It's really wholesome as well. You can also write out, a bonus tip as well would be to write out words and short paragraphs using words from memory. So something I'm doing at the moment is when I do flashcards for words afterwards, I just try and write out as many words as possible from memory. And if you want, you can also put them into like a short story as well, if you want to do that. That kind of thing can be really good for gauging your progress and making sure you are actually making progress. Comprehension questions as well. I haven't done as many of them, but if you're using a website like Lingua, they do comprehension questions for each short story. Obviously, don't be silly. Don't like find Harry Potter trivia questions when you're reading Harry Potter in a foreign language and you've already read it in English, because all of your knowledge for those questions is going to be from the English book, so that would obviously be cheating, but you know what I mean. You can try and implement comprehension questions if you're reading a text that you've never read in English to gauge your understanding of the text, and over time you will find you do improve. So yeah, make sure you are making progress in the foreign language. Make sure you are going back and rereading stuff to see that you have gotten better. Make sure that you are learning words, and at the end of the day, as I said before, reading is, reading is learning new words and familiarizing yourself. That is how you get better at reading. So make sure you're doing those two things, and then make sure you revisit to gauge how much progress you've made. The fifth and final thing, apart from the bonus tip I'll give you to understand, is persistence. And by the way, if learning a language is tough for you right now, I'd highly recommend you scroll down and check out my course, The Language Learning Accelerator. Could not recommend it highly enough for anyone looking to learn a language. It's extremely cheap at the moment, and yeah, I would recommend you take a look. But the final thing I will recommend is persistence. Reading needs to be tough, as I said before, otherwise there's nothing to learn. Just be grateful for the fact that reading is difficult. If reading was easy, you would be wasting your time. The fact that reading in a foreign language is difficult means that you're not wasting your time. Every time you encounter a word you don't understand, that's +1 point for learning. That's +1 learning point. And I want you to be grateful for that. Be resilient. Someone else somewhere in the world just quit and you didn't. So every time it's difficult to read, someone somewhere gave up and you didn't. You beat that person. And that's what I want you to remember. It is difficult. And whenever you encounter any problems at all, you're finding it difficult to remember words, you can easily journal on that. Just get a book, get your language learning notebook, and just write about the problem, and you'll find it's actually very easy to come up with a solution. And if you want, you can join my free Discord server below, where you can actually get recommendations from other people as well. So if you did stick around to the end, here's a bonus tip as well. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. But it is to know the objective. Sometimes, guys, people do stuff and they don't actually have an objective in mind. I think when you are reading a book, for example, know what you're going to do with the book. So are you going to read the book extensively for pleasure? Are you going to read a chapter intensively and write down every single word? Are you going to reread it? I just think this is super useful. So for me, I kind of got frustrated reading Harry Potter, and that was because I was being silly and I didn't know why I was reading it, what my goal was. And now I realize my goal isn't to just read every single book and not look up a single word and just read for pleasure, because I would still get better, but I wouldn't make as much progress as I potentially could. My goal is to get better, so I need to actually go back and reread chapters, and that can be uncomfortable sometimes, but I know that it's delayed gratification, and if I do this enough, I will be way better in the future, and that is where I want to be in the future inevitably. So just understand that. But guys, thank you for watching. Definitely hit the subscribe button, and have a good one.